Most people think the most dangerous person in a room full of mobsters is the man holding the gun. They're wrong. The most dangerous person is the one everyone ignores, the one pouring the wine, the one changing the ashtrays, the one they think is invisible. In 2014, a waitress named Chloe Grace was working the night shift at New York's most exclusive, members-only Italian supper club. She was broke, exhausted, and seemingly nobody. But when the city's most ruthless Capo Lorenzo De Luca walked in, he made a fatal mistake. He assumed she was just an American girl. He didn't know she understood the old Sicilian dialect, and he certainly didn't expect that she knew the name he had buried 20 years ago, a name that would start a war before the dessert was even served. The rule at Il Cigno Nero, the Black Swan, was simple, written in the cold stare of the maitre d' rather than the employee handbook. You are furniture. You are air. You do not exist until someone needs a refill. Chloe Grace was very good at not existing. At 24, with rent 3 months overdue on her shoebox apartment in Queens, and a student loan debt that felt like a physical weight on her chest, she had perfected the art of the hollow gaze. It was a specific way of looking at a table of men, discussing racketeering charges without actually seeing them. You focused on the bridge of their noses or the knot of their silk ties, never the eyes. Eye contact was an invitation, and in a place like Il Cigno, invitations were dangerous. The restaurant was tucked away in the basement of a nondescript pre-war building in Tribeca. There was no signage, only a heavy steel door and a camera. Inside, however, it was a different world. Mahogany paneling, plush velvet booths, the color of dried blood, and the smell of expensive veal stock and Cuban cigar smoke. It was a Tuesday, typically a slow night, but the energy in the kitchen was frantic. "Table 4. Marco, the head chef, barked, sliding a plate of osso buco across the stainless steel pass. "And Chloe? If you drop a single drop of sauce on this tablecloth, don't bother coming back." Chloe wiped her hands on her apron. "Who's at table 4? Marco stopped chopping. The kitchen went silent for a beat. Even the dishwasher seemed to pause. "Lorenzo De Luca," Marco said, his voice dropping an octave. "And the entourage. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't smile. Just serve." Lorenzo De Luca. The name was often in the New York Post, usually accompanied by words like alleged, reputed, and untouchable. He was the underboss of the Gambetti crime family, a man who had risen through the ranks with a brutality that was legendary, even among his peers. They called him Il Lupo the Wolf because he never left scraps behind. Chloe picked up the tray, her wrists straining under the weight of the heavy porcelain. She took a breath, smoothed her expression into neutral obedience, and pushed through the swinging doors. The dining room was dimly lit, illuminated mostly by candlelight and the soft glow of the bar. Table 4 was in the back, the coveted King's Corner that offered a view of the entrance, but shielded the occupants from the rest of the room. There were 4 men. 3 were thick-necked, wearing suits that strained at the shoulders, laughing loudly at a joke Chloe didn't catch. But the 4th man, sitting in the center, was silent. Lorenzo De Luca didn't look like his mugshots. In person, the grainy black-and-white photos failed to capture the terrifying stillness of him. He was younger than the other dons, early 30s perhaps, with sharp aristocratic features and hair slicked back, severe and tight. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Chloe's entire education. He wasn't laughing. He was watching the door, his fingers idly twisting a heavy gold signet ring on his pinky. Chloe approached the table. "Gentlemen," she said softly, her voice flat. "The osso buco." She moved with the precision of a surgeon. "Plate down. Rotate 45 degrees so the bone faced the customer. Step back. Repeat. One of the bodyguards, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow named Vinny, leered at her. "Hey, sweetness. You got a name, or do I just call you Legs?" Chloe didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the water glass she was refilling. "Chloe, sir." "Chloe." Vinny chuckled, reaching out to grab her wrist. "That's a pretty name. Italian." Chloe froze. The contact was a violation of the unspoken rules, but pulling away would be an insult. "My grandmother was, sir." "Leave her alone, Vincent," a voice cut through the air. It was low, raspy, but commanding. Lorenzo De Luca hadn't looked up from his plate, but the temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vinny released her wrist immediately, muttering an apology. Lorenzo finally looked up. His eyes were dark, almost black, and completely devoid of warmth. He studied Chloe for a second, not as a woman, but as a potential threat. He was assessing her cheap shoes, her frayed cuffs, the exhaustion under her eyes. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't a gratitude. It was a dismissal. Chloe nodded and retreated to the shadows of the service station. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She needed this shift to end. She needed to go home, count her tips, and forget that men like Lorenzo De Luca existed. But the night was just beginning. 20 minutes later, the heavy steel door at the front opened again. The air in the room shifted. A new group walked in, led by an older man with silver hair and a cane. Chloe saw the maitre d' go pale. He rushed over to Marco in the kitchen. "It's Stefano Rossi," the maitre d' hissed. "The butcher. He's not on the reservation list." "He's meeting De Luca?" Marco asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Looks like it. They're sitting at table 4 now." God help us. Chloe watched from the kitchen porthole. Stefano Rossi was a rival. The newspapers said the Gambettis and the Rossis had been in a Cold War for 2 years over Port Authority contracts in New Jersey. For them to be sitting at the same table meant a peace treaty or a trap. "Chloe," Marco said, shoving a bottle of 1990 Barolo and a fresh tray of espresso cups into her hands. "Get out there. They requested the special service. That means you stay close, you keep the wine flowing, and you keep the glasses full. If they go empty, you die. Understand?" "Why me?" she whispered. "Because the other girls are terrified," Marco said grimly. "And you need the money." He was right. She gripped the tray. She walked back out into the lion's den. As she approached the table, the atmosphere had changed. The laughter was gone. The bodyguards had moved to the bar, leaving only Lorenzo De Luca and Stefano Rossi at the booth. It was intimate, dangerous. They were speaking English loud enough for her to hear as she uncorked the wine. "It's a generous offer, Lorenzo." Rossi was saying, his voice like grinding gravel. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "New Jersey is a headache. I'm doing you a favor, taking it off your hands." "I don't recall asking for favors, Stefano," Lorenzo replied, leaning back, swirling his wine. "And I don't recall offering New Jersey." Chloe poured the wine. Her hand was steady despite the adrenaline. She was invisible. She was furniture. "Times change, my boy," Rossi said, reaching for the sugar bowl. "Your father knew when to compromise. It's a shame he's not here to guide you." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "My father is dead. I guide myself." "Of course," Rossi said soothingly. "Of course." Chloe finished pouring and took a step back, intending to retreat to the service station. "Stay," Rossi said, holding up a hand. He didn't look at her. "We might need more wine. Stand there." He pointed to a spot against the pillar barely 3 feet from the table. Chloe obeyed. She clasped her hands in front of her apron and stared at the wall. She was close enough to smell Rossi's cologne, Old Spice, and decay. Then everything changed. Rossi took a sip of his wine, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and looked at Lorenzo. When he spoke again, he didn't speak English. He didn't speak the standard Italian that they taught in schools, the musical flowing language of Tuscany. He switched to a guttural, chopped dialect, Sicilian, specifically the dialect of the deep Palermo Mountains, a language of farmers and killers, thick with slang and double meanings. Rossi looked at Chloe, briefly dismissed her as a dumb American waitress who probably only knew spaghetti and ciao, and turned back to Lorenzo. "U picciriddu non sapi niente," Rossi said in Sicilian. The boy knows nothing. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. He replied in English, "Speak English, Stefano. We are in America." Rossi laughed. "I prefer the tongue of our ancestors when discussing delicate matters. It feels more respectful." He continued in the heavy dialect. "Besides, it's good to know who is really listening." Lorenzo sighed, clearly annoyed but not alarmed. He took a drink. Chloe stood frozen against the pillar. Her blood ran cold. They didn't know. They couldn't know. Chloe Grace wasn't just Chloe Grace. She was born Chloe di Saronno. She had spent the first 10 years of her life in a tiny village outside of Corleone, raised by a grandmother who refused to speak a word of English. She didn't just understand Italian. She breathed the Palermo dialect. It was the language of her childhood nightmares and lullabies, and right now Stefano Rossi wasn't discussing a business deal. As Chloe stood there, staring blankly at the wall, Rossi turned to his associate, who had just approached the table, a man Lorenzo seemed to think was a neutral mediator. Rossi spoke in Sicilian, fast and low. "As soon as he drinks the coffee, cut his throat. Do it before the check comes. We take the body out of the back kitchen." The words hung in the air, heavier than the cigar smoke. "As soon as he drinks the coffee, cut his throat." Chloe's heart stopped. She felt a physical jolt, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. She locked her knees to keep from collapsing. Her eyes remained fixed on a sconce on the wall, but her peripheral vision was screaming. She watched Stefano Rossi smile at Lorenzo. It was a grandfatherly smile. "You should try the espresso here, Lorenzo. It's the best in the city. I ordered a fresh potten for us." Lorenzo, unaware that his death sentence had just been pronounced in the dialect of his homeland, nodded. "Fine. Then we discuss the terms." "Then we discuss the terms," Rossi echoed. The mediator, a towering man named Bruno, who had been standing silently by the booth, shifted his weight. Chloe noticed his hand drift toward the inside of his jacket. They weren't going to use guns. Guns were loud. They were going to use a knife. Quick, quiet, messy. Chloe's mind raced. "Do nothing," her survival instinct screamed. "If you react, they kill you too. You are the waitress. You are furniture. You saw nothing. If she walked away now, Lorenzo De Luca would be dead in 5 minutes. His throat would be opened right there on the velvet booth. They would roll him in the carpet and drag him out the back fire exit, where the security cameras were conveniently broken. She would have to mop up the blood. She looked at Lorenzo. He was arrogant, ruthless, a criminal. He was a wolf. He probably deserved it. But then she saw him rub his temple, a gesture of tired humanity. He looked young. And more than that, she knew who he was. Not just the mob boss. Her grandmother used to tell stories about the old families, the ones who had honor before the drugs and the greed took over. She spoke of the Vanzettis, a family wiped out in the 90s. Lorenzo De Luca wasn't a De Luca by blood. It was a rumor in the underground, a whisper she had heard her uncles argue about years ago over grappa. He was an orphan adopted by the De Lucas. His real lineage was a secret that kept him safe. The espresso machine hissed loudly from the bar, snapping Chloe back to the moment. The bartender placed 2 steaming cups of espresso on her tray. "Table 4. Hurry up," he said. Chloe picked up the tray. Her hands were trembling so badly the spoons rattled against the saucers. She pressed the tray against her stomach to dampen the noise. Walk, she told herself. Just walk. She approached the table. Rossi was leaning in, telling a story in English, now something about a racehorse he owned. Bruno the assassin was positioned perfectly behind Lorenzo's right shoulder. Chloe placed the first cup down in front of Rossi. "Grazie, Bella." Rossi grunted, not looking up. She moved to Lorenzo. She had a split second. If she spoke in English, Rossi would hear. If she screamed, Bruno would shoot her before she got a word out. If she did nothing, Lorenzo died. She placed the cup down in front of Lorenzo. The china clinked softly against the table. She didn't pull away. She stayed leaning over the table, pretending to adjust the sugar bowl. Her face was inches from Lorenzo's ear. Rossi was busy blowing on his hot coffee. Bruno was adjusting his cuff. This was it. Chloe didn't whisper a warning like, "Run," or "He has a gun." That would be too confusing. He might hesitate. She needed to shock him into immediate, violent action. She needed to prove in one breath that she was an ally. She spoke in the deepest, most rural Sicilian dialect, the accent of the old country, the one Rossi thought was his secret code. "Lu macellaio, ha il coltello, pronto Alessio Vanzetti." The butcher has the knife ready. Alessio Vanzetti. Lorenzo froze. It wasn't just the warning. It was the name. Alessio Vanzetti. The name he hadn't heard since he was 6 years old. The name of a dead boy. The name of the true heir to a fallen kingdom. Time seemed to suspend. Lorenzo's eyes snapped up, locking onto Chloe's. For the first time all night, he really saw her. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also the fierce intelligence. He saw the heritage in the shape of her face. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at Rossi. The wolf didn't hesitate. Lorenzo's hand, which had been resting on the table, shot up with blinding speed. He didn't reach for a weapon. He grabbed the boiling hot pot of coffee Chloe was still holding on her tray and smashed it directly into Bruno's face. The assassin screamed as the scalding liquid blinded him. In the same motion, Lorenzo kicked the table over, pinning Stefano Rossi against the booth. The heavy oak table crushed the old man's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. Chaos erupted. "Gun!" someone screamed. Lorenzo was already moving. He grabbed Chloe by the arm, a grip like an iron shackle. "Down!" he roared, throwing her behind the overturned table, just as the first gunshot shattered the mirrored wall above their heads. Glass rained down on them. The restaurant exploded into panic. Patrons were diving under tables. Vinny and the other De Luca bodyguards at the bar were drawing their weapons, returning fire at Rossi's men, who had emerged from the shadows. Lorenzo was crouched over Chloe, shielding her body with his own. He had a gun in his hand now, a sleek black pistol drawn from a shoulder holster she hadn't even seen. He fired 2 shots over the rim of the table. Bang! Bang! 2 thuds followed. He looked down at her. His face was inches from hers, adrenaline dilating his pupils. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a growl amidst the gunfire. Chloe was shaking, covering her ears. Just a waitress who speaks the dialect of the Corleonesi. Lorenzo fired another shot. A waitress who knows the name Vanzetti. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. You just saved my life, or you just complicated it. Which is it? I heard them, she yelled back, finding her voice. They were going to cut your throat when you drank the coffee. A bullet ripped through the velvet booth, padding inches from Lorenzo's head. We have to move, Lorenzo yelled. Vinny, back door. Blocked, Vinny shouted from across the room, taking cover behind the bar. They got guys in the alley, Lorenzo cursed. He looked at the kitchen doors. Then he looked at Chloe. Is there another way out? He asked. You work here. Tell me there's another way out. Chloe's mind flashed to the basement storage room. The old coal chute. It was tight, dirty, and led to the subway tunnels, but she used it to sneak cigarettes. The coal chute, she gasped. In the dry storage. It leads to the N-train tunnel. Lorenzo hauled her to her feet. Lead the way, Chloe, and don't let go of my hand. Why? She cried as they began to scramble toward the kitchen, staying low. Because, Lorenzo said, firing blindly behind him to keep Rossi's men down. You know my real name. If they catch you now, they'll peel your skin off, just to ask how you knew it. The reality crashed into her. By whispering that name, she hadn't just saved him. She had bound herself to him. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a witness, an accomplice, and a liability. Go. Lorenzo shoved her through the kitchen doors. Pots and pans were clattering as the staff cowered in the corners. Chloe sprinted past Marco, who was hiding under the prep station. She didn't stop. She ran for the heavy freezer door in the back, Lorenzo right on her heels. She fumbled with the latch of the dry storage room. Faster, Lorenzo urged, glancing behind them. The kitchen doors swung open. Bruno burned and, furious, stumbled in, a gun in his hand. There, Bruno screamed. Chloe got the door open. They tumbled into the darkness of the storage room, just as bullets pinged against the steel doorframe. Lorenzo slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. It wouldn't hold them for long. Where? Lorenzo demanded in the dark. Here, Chloe said, pulling aside a stack of flour sacks to reveal a rusted iron hatch in the floor. Lorenzo looked at the small hole, then at her. Ladies first. Chloe dropped into the darkness of the chute. She slid down the rough concrete, tearing her tights and scraping her arms, landing hard on damp gravel tracks. The air smelled of ozone and rat droppings. A second later, Lorenzo landed beside her. He straightened his suit jacket, though it was now covered in dust. He looked up at the circle of light from the chute. Voices were shouting above. Move, he commanded, grabbing her hand again. They ran into the darkness of the subway tunnel, the sound of an approaching train rumbling in the distance. Chloe Grace had started her shift, hoping for good tips. She was ending it, running through a subway tunnel with the most dangerous man in New York, fleeing a massacre she had started with a whisper. And the worst part? She knew with terrifying certainty that Lorenzo De Luca wasn't going to let her go. Not after what she said. The waitress was dead. The survivor had just been born. The silence of the subway tunnel was a heavy, suffocating blanket after the cacophony of the restaurant. There was only the dripping of water from ancient pipes and the rhythmic crunch of their shoes on the gravel ballast. Chloe couldn't feel her legs. She was moving on pure, animalistic instinct, her hand crushed inside Lorenzo De Luca's grip. He didn't look back at her. He moved with the predatory confidence of a man who owned the dark, his flashlight, cutting a sharp beam through the gloom, illuminating scuttling rats and graffiti from the 1980s. They walked for what felt like miles, though it was likely only 20 minutes. Chloe's apron was torn, her breathing ragged. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving behind a cold, shivering terror. She had just assaulted a made man, Bruno, and witnessed an attempted hit on a capo. In her world, the world of overdue rent and subway passes, this was impossible. "Stop," Lorenzo said. He halted abruptly near a service ladder leading up to a grate. He turned the flashlight off, plunging them into total darkness. The sudden absence of light was terrifying. "Listen to me." His voice came from the dark, low and close. He wasn't out of breath. "When we go up this ladder, we are on Canal Street. My driver is 3 minutes away. You get in the car. You do not speak to the driver. You do not look out the window. You look at me. Do you understand? I need to go home." Chloe stammered, her voice trembling. "My shift. My bag is still in the locker." Lorenzo clicked the light back on, shining it not in her eyes, but at her chest, highlighting the bloodstains on her white uniform shirt. It wasn't her blood. It was Bruno's from the coffee spray. "Chloe," he said, testing the name as if tasting a new wine. "You don't have a locker anymore. You don't have a shift. And if you go back to your apartment in Queens, Stefano Rossi will have men waiting in your living room before you even get your keys out. You are dead to that life. Do you understand?" The reality hit her like a physical blow. She slumped against the cold concrete wall. "I didn't ask for this." "No," Lorenzo admitted. He reached out his leather-gloved hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. The gesture was shockingly intimate, yet possessive. "You didn't ask. You volunteered. Now climb." They emerged into the humid New York night. The city was oblivious. Taxis honked, tourists took photos, and the smell of roasting nuts filled the air. It was surreal to see normal life continuing when she felt like she had just walked out of hell. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb the second they stepped onto the pavement. The timing was military. The back door swung open. Lorenzo shoved her in gently but firmly, then slid in beside her. "Drive," he told the driver. "The safe house, not the mansion." "Yes, boss." The door locked with a heavy thud, sealing them inside the quiet, leather-scented cocoon. The car accelerated smoothly, merging into the traffic. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The streetlights flickered rhythmically over Lorenzo's face. He was checking his phone, typing rapidly, his jaw set in a hard line. He was managing a war. He was ordering retaliation. People were likely dying right now because of the text messages he was sending. Chloe stared at her hands. They were filthy with soot and dried coffee. She felt small. She felt ruined. Why Vanzetti? The question broke the silence like a gunshot. Lorenzo hadn't looked up from his phone. Chloe swallowed. Her throat was dry. "What?" Lorenzo finally turned to her. In the dim light of the car, his eyes were pools of dark intelligence. He placed his phone face down on the leather seat. "The name," he said softly. "Alessio Vanzetti. There are perhaps 5 people alive who know that name belongs to me. 2 of them are in Sicily. 1 is me. 1 was my adopted father, who is dead. And the 5th..." He paused, studying her. "The 5th is an old woman who hasn't spoken in 10 years. So tell me, Chloe, the waitress, how do you know the name of a ghost?" Chloe looked out the window. They were crossing the bridge, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. "My grandmother," she whispered. "Your grandmother." Lorenzo shifted, turning his body fully toward her. He was encroaching on her space, his presence overwhelming. "Who is she?" "She was a nurse," Chloe said, her voice barely audible. "In Palermo, before she came here. She worked for a family, a wealthy family." "The Vanzettis," Lorenzo finished for her. Chloe nodded. "She told me stories about the fires, about the night the villa burned. She said she saved the youngest boy. She said she handed him to the De Lucas to hide him because the wolves were at the door." Lorenzo stared at her. The mask of the ruthless mob boss slipped just for a fraction of a second, revealing a flicker of genuine shock. She called him "You Pichiridu Doro." Chloe continued the Sicilian dialect, rolling off her tongue, naturally now. "The golden boy." She said he had a scar on his shoulder, like a crescent moon. Lorenzo sat back, the leather creaking. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling a long, shaky breath. He looked at her with new eyes. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a link to a past he had buried under layers of violence and money. "What is your grandmother's name?" he asked, his voice rough. "Rosa. Rosa di Saronno." Lorenzo closed his eyes. "Rosa," he murmured. "Nonna Rosa." The car began to slow down. They were pulling into a private underground garage of a high-rise building that pierced the sky. "She is alive?" Lorenzo asked. "She's in a home in Jersey," Chloe said. "She has dementia. She doesn't remember me most days, but she remembers you. She prays for Alessio every night." The car stopped. The driver turned off the engine. Lorenzo looked at Chloe. The danger in his eyes was gone, replaced by something far more complex. A heavy burdensome obligation. "Then I owe her," Lorenzo said quietly. "And I owe you." He opened the door. "Come. You look terrible. You need to wash the blood off before we talk about how I'm going to keep you alive." The penthouse was less a home and more a fortress of glass and steel. It was located on the 80th floor, looking down on Manhattan like a god looking down on an ant-hill. The floors were polished concrete, the furniture severe and modern. There were no personal photos, no clutter. It was the home of a man who was ready to leave at a moment's notice. Lorenzo locked the heavy front door, punching a code into a keypad that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. "Don't touch the windows," he said, tossing his keys onto a marble console table. "They are bulletproof, but I don't like prints." Chloe stood in the middle of the vast living room, hugging her arms around herself. She felt absurdly out of place in her stained waitress uniform amidst the millions of dollars of real estate. "The bathroom is down the hall, second door on the left," Lorenzo said, walking toward a liquor cabinet. "There are clean towels. I'll find you something to wear. Burn the uniform. Burn it. It has Bruno's DNA on it, and gunpowder residue. Unless you want to frame yourself for assault, put it in the incinerator chute in the bathroom wall." Chloe nodded mutely and retreated down the hall. The bathroom was the size of her entire apartment. It was all slate and rain showers. She locked the door, stripped off the ruined uniform, and shoved it into the small chrome hatch in the wall. Watching it disappear felt like watching her old life vanish. She stepped into the shower, turning the water up as hot as she could stand. She scrubbed her skin until it was red, trying to wash away the feeling of the grease from the kitchen, the subway grime, and the lingering fear. Alessio Vanzetti. She had said the name. She had invoked the ghost. When she finally turned off the water, she found a stack of clothes waiting on the marble vanity. Lorenzo must have left them while she was in the shower. There was a pair of grey sweatpants and a black cashmere t-shirt. They were men's clothes, his clothes. She put them on. The pants were too long, forcing her to roll the waistband, and the shirt hung off her shoulder smelling of sandalwood and expensive tobacco. It felt like wearing a suit of armor that didn't fit. She walked back out to the living room. Lorenzo was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He had removed his suit jacket and unbuttoned his vest. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink tattoos that looked like jagged geometric patterns. He turned when he heard her bare feet on the floor. His gaze swept over her, taking in the oversized clothes. For a moment, the air in the room grew thick. "Better," he said. He held out a second glass. "Drink. It's 25-year-old Scotch. It will stop your hands from shaking." Chloe took the glass. Her hands were indeed still trembling. She took a large sip. The liquor burned pleasantly on the way down, settling like a warm fire in her stomach. "Sit!" Lorenzo gestured to the sprawling leather sofa. He sat opposite her on the edge of the coffee table, leaning forward. The distance between them was small. "So," Lorenzo began, his voice low and deliberate. "Rosa di Saronno saved me from the fire in 1994. She smuggled me out in a laundry basket. I remember the smell of the linen." Chloe watched him. "She never told me the details, just that she saved the boy." "She saved the heir," Lorenzo corrected. "The Vanzettis were the kings of Sicily. The Rossis, the man you saw tonight, were the peasants who usurped the throne. They killed my father, my mother, my brothers. They think the bloodline ended that night." He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving hers. "By calling me Alessio in front of Rossi," Lorenzo said. "You didn't just warn me. You announced to the butcher that the king is still alive." Chloe gasped softly. I just wanted to shock you, to make you move." "You succeeded." Lorenzo gave a grim half-smile. "But you also started a war. Rossi will not stop now. He knows that as long as I breathe, his claim to power is illegitimate. He will come for me with everything he has." He leaned in closer. "And he will come for you. Because you are the witness. And because you are the granddaughter of the woman who cheated him 20 years ago." Chloe felt the cold return. "So what happens now?" "Do I go into witness protection?" "The police?" Lorenzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The police, half of them are on Rossi's payroll. The other half are on mine. No, Chloe. There is no police for people like us." He set his glass down. "You stay here," he said firmly. "Here." Chloe looked around the sterile penthouse. "For how long? Until Rossi is dead. Or until I am." "That could be forever," she whispered. "It could be a week. It could be a year." Lorenzo stood up and walked over to her. He towered over her seated form. "But know this, Chloe. You are not a prisoner. But you are also not free. You are mine." The word hung in the air. Mine. It possessed a weight that made her breath hitch. "I don't belong to anyone," Chloe said, trying to summon a scrap of her defiance. "I'm just a waitress." "Not anymore," Lorenzo replied. "A waitress serves food. You serve a higher purpose now. You are the keeper of my name." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. "Your old phone is in the river. This is your new one. It has one number saved in it. Mine. You answer it when it rings. You do not call anyone else." He handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. The electric current was undeniable fear, mixed with a strange magnetic pull. "Get some sleep," Lorenzo said, stepping back. "The guest room is down the hall. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer. But no one gets through that front door unless I let them in." He turned to walk away, heading toward his office. "Lorenzo," Chloe called out. He stopped his back to her. "Alessio," he corrected softly. "When we are alone, you call me Alessio." He didn't wait for a response. He walked into the shadows of the hallway, leaving Chloe alone in the glass cage, wearing his clothes, holding his whiskey, and bearing the weight of his secret. She walked to the window and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, men were loading guns and sharpening knives, hunting for the girl who knew too much. Chloe took another sip of the scotch. It didn't burn this time. She wasn't the prey. She was in the wolf's den. And strangely, for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like running. She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, at the center of the storm. Days in the penthouse bled into one another, distinguished only by the shifting light across the Manhattan skyline. For Chloe, the world outside overdue. Rent the subway, the smell of stale coffee felt like a hallucination she had finally woken up from. Her reality now was silence, the hum of the air filtration system, and the click of Lorenzo's encrypted laptop keys. Lorenzo Alessio was a ghost in his own home. He would leave before dawn, his face grim, and return long after she had feigned sleep. The war he spoke of was happening in the negative spaces in hushed phone calls on the balcony and news reports of industrial accidents in New Jersey. Chloe wasn't a prisoner, but she wasn't free. She was a secret kept in a glass jar. It was Tuesday, a week since the restaurant, when the illusion of safety shattered. A storm had rolled in off the Hudson, lashing rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse felt like a ship at sea, isolated and adrift. Chloe was in the kitchen when the front door chimed a harsh electronic buzz that signaled a perimeter breach or an emergency override. She froze, gripping the handle of a chef's knife. The door slid open. Lorenzo stumbled in. He didn't look like the wolf of Tribeca tonight. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was soaked not just with rain, but with a dark, blossoming stain spreading across his ribs. His skin possessed a terrifying waxen grey quality. "Alessio." Chloe dropped the knife and ran to him. He waved her off, staggering toward the marble kitchen island. "Don't," he rasped, his voice wet and tight. "Don't touch me." "You're hurt," she said, the smell of copper and ozone filling the sleek kitchen. "A graze," he lied, gripping the counter until his knuckles turned white. "Rossi's men. It was a setup. We need a doctor." Chloe reached for the secure phone. "No." Lorenzo's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was weak, trembling but desperate. "No doctors. Doctors talk. If word gets out that I'm wounded, the sharks will circle. The families are on the fence. If I bleed, I lose." He looked at her, his dark eyes hazy with pain, but burning with resolve. "You have to do it." Chloe stared at him. "Do what?" "The first aid kit, master bathroom. Get the vodka from the bar, and a sewing kit." "I'm a waitress," Chloe whispered, panic rising. "Not a surgeon. My grandmother was the nurse, not me." "You have her hands," Lorenzo said, sliding down to sit on the floor against the cabinets. "And you're the only person in this world I can trust right now. Go." The command snapped her into motion. She returned seconds later with gauze antiseptic, a bottle of Grey Goose, and a needle. She knelt beside him. "This is going to hurt." Lorenzo let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I hope so. If it doesn't, I'm already dead." Chloe's hands shook as she cut away his soaked shirt. The wound was ugly, a jagged tear along his left side, where a bullet had skipped off a rib. It required stitches immediately. She poured the vodka over the wound. Lorenzo hissed, his head thumping back against the cabinet, the cords of his neck straining. He didn't scream. He simply metabolized the pain into silence. "Talk to me," Chloe said, threading the needle, her vision blurring with tears of focus. "Keep yourself awake. Tell me why Rossi hates you. The real reason." Lorenzo watched her through slit eyes. "Power," he murmured. "But mostly envy. My father, the real Don Vanzetti. He ruled with respect. Rossi was his underboss. He wanted the throne, but he knew the people would never love him. So he decided to burn the kingdom down instead." Chloe pushed the needle through the tough skin. Lorenzo's body seized his abdominal muscles, locking rigid under her fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Keep going." He groaned. "I came back to bury them, Chloe. To finish the funeral that started 20 years ago." When she finally finished, she bandaged him tightly. He was exhausted, his face slick with sweat. "Help me up," he commanded. "I have to answer the 9:00 p.m. check-in call. If I don't, my capos will panic." Chloe wedged her shoulder under his arm. She hauled him up, straining under his dead weight, and lowered him onto the leather sofa. He immediately reached for his phone, composing his voice into a mask of authority. "It's done," he said into the receiver, showing zero trace of the agony ripping through his side. "Hold the line." He hung up, and the mask dropped. He looked at Chloe. "You have steady hands," he said softly. "I carried trays of martini glasses for 6 years," she replied, wiping blood from her fingers. "You learn balance." Lorenzo studied her. The dynamic had shifted. She had seen his blood. She had sown his flesh. The barrier of boss and civilian was gone. "You aren't safe here anymore," he said. "Rossi smells blood." "I'm not leaving," Chloe said. "You said I'm the keeper of your name. If I leave, you're just Lorenzo De Luca, another thug with a gun. With me, you're Alessio Vanzetti." Lorenzo stared at her for a long time. The rain battered the glass. "Come here," he said. Chloe hesitated, then sat beside him. He didn't touch her, but he leaned his head back, closing his eyes. "Stay close," he murmured. "I need to sleep. Watch the door." "I'll watch," she promised. Within minutes, the most dangerous man in New York was asleep. Chloe sat in the dark, watching him breathe, knowing she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She wasn't just observing the story anymore. She was writing it. 3 days later, the fever broke. Lorenzo's strength returned with terrifying speed, fueled by a rage that seemed to vibrate off him in waves. But the war wasn't going well. The penthouse living room had been transformed into a command center. Maps of New York and New Jersey were spread across the dining table, weighed down by burner phones and loaded magazines. Chloe watched from the kitchen island, sipping espresso. She knew better than to interrupt, but she listened. She listened to the frustration in Lorenzo's voice as he spoke to his lieutenants. "I don't care what the wiretap says," Lorenzo was shouting into the phone, pacing the room while favoring his stitched side. "Rossi isn't moving drugs. He's moving something else. He's meeting with the Calabrians tomorrow. Why, he hates the Calabrians." He slammed the phone down. "Useless. Everyone is blind." He ran a hand through his hair, staring at the map. "He's sending messages I can't read. Old codes. He's rallying the families using a claim. He's telling them he possesses La Santità." Chloe set her cup down. The word triggered a memory, a whisper from her grandmother's bedside years ago. "The sanctity?" she asked softly. Lorenzo stopped pacing and looked at her. "It's a religious term. It doesn't make sense in this context." "It's not religious," Chloe said, walking over to the table. She looked at the circled location in the Bronx, a bakery front. In the mountain villages, near Corleone la Santita, doesn't mean holiness. It refers to the soil, the land documents, the original deeds. Lorenzo frowned. What are you talking about? The Vanzettis didn't just own the crime, she explained, her voice gaining confidence. They owned the land, the olive groves, the shipping ports. The deeds were signed in the 1920s. They are the source of the legitimacy. Without them, a boss is just a gangster. With them, he is a landlord. She looked up at Lorenzo. Rossi is claiming he found the deed box. That's why the other families are listening. He's saying the Vanzetti claim is legally dead. Lorenzo's eyes widened. The realization struck him like a physical blow. My father kept that box in the safe at the villa. It was never found after the fire. Rossi is bluffing, Chloe pressed. If he had the papers, he would have published them. He's meeting the Calabrians to find them. He's desperate. Lorenzo looked at the map, then at Chloe. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. You're right. The Calabrians run an antique shop 2 blocks from here. That's where the meeting is. He grabbed his leather jacket, wincing slightly as he pulled it on. I have to go. If I intercept that meeting, I can prove Rossi is a fraud. I'm coming with you, Chloe said. Lorenzo paused, his hand on his holster. Absolutely not. This is a raid. If you go in with guns blazing, they will burn the evidence, she countered, stepping closer. They are merchants, Alessio. They respect lineage, not violence. You speak the city Italian, the language of money. I speak the village dialect. I speak the language of their grandfathers. You need a translator. Lorenzo looked down at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire he felt in his own blood. She was right. He needed the bridge to the past. Get your coat, he commanded, and wear the Kevlar vest underneath. The antique shop in the Bronx smelled of dust, lemon polish, and hidden sins. It was late, the metal grates pulled down, but Lorenzo picked the side lock with practiced ease. They moved through the shadows of the shop, a maze of towering grandfather clocks. In the back room, light spilled out from under a door. Voices were murmuring. Lorenzo kicked the door open. 3 men sat around a card table. 2 were heavy-set Calabrians. The third was a rat-faced lieutenant of Rossi's. Weapons were drawn instantly. Sit down! Lorenzo roared, leveling his silenced pistol at the lieutenant's head. The Calabrians didn't flinch. They looked at the gun, then at Lorenzo unimpressed. They reached for shotguns taped under the table. Lorenzo was outnumbered in the tight space. He was losing control. Chloe stepped out from behind him. She didn't look at the guns. She looked directly at the older Calabrian, a man with eyes like hard coal. She spoke. Not in English, but in the thick, archaic dialect of the Calabrian highlands. Honored elder, she said, her voice melodic and respectful. Would you sell the inheritance of a king to a thief who steals sheep in the night? The old man's eyes widened. He lowered his hand. You speak the old tongue, he replied in the dialect. Who are you? I am the voice of the Vanzetti blood, Chloe said, gesturing to Lorenzo. And this is Alessio Vanzetti, the boy who survived the fire. Rossi offers you silver. We offer you honor. If you give the box to the rightful heir, you will have the favor of the Vanzetti family for 3 generations. The room fell silent. The old man looked at Lorenzo, finally seeing the resemblance to the dead Don. He kicked a rusted metal box from under the table toward them. Take it, the old man grunted, and get out. Lorenzo grabbed the box. They backed out of the room, leaving Rossi's man shaking and empty-handed. As they hit the cold night air of the alley, the adrenaline crashed over them. They had done it. They had stolen the crown back without firing a shot. Lorenzo stopped near the car, placing the box on the hood. He looked at Chloe, his eyes blazing. "You," he breathed, shaking his head. "You sounded like a queen." "I told you," Chloe whispered, her breath misting in the air. "I understand, Sicilian." Lorenzo didn't speak. He reached out, grabbing the nape of her neck, and pulled her to him. It wasn't the touch of a protector anymore. It was a hungry, desperate claim. He kissed her hard, possessive, and full of a promise of violence against the world and devotion to her. Chloe kissed him back, feeling the gun holster under his jacket and the beat of his heart against hers. "Now we win," Lorenzo whispered against her lips. "Now we kill the butcher." The sit-down took place in the back room of Vesuvio, a neutral territory in Little Italy. The air was thick with tension and the smell of roasting garlic. The heads of the 5 families were present, seated around a circular oak table. At the head sat Stefano Rossi, looking triumphant. He had called this meeting to formally claim the Vanzetti territory, arguing that the bloodline was extinguished. Lorenzo walked in at exactly midnight. He didn't kick the door down. He walked in with the calm assurance of a man entering his own living room. And he wasn't alone. Chloe walked beside him, wearing the black dress and a look of cold, imperious judgment. "You have no business here, De Luca." Rossi sneered, though his eyes darted nervously to the heavy iron box in Lorenzo's hand. "This is a meeting for bosses, not orphans." Lorenzo placed the box on the table. The heavy thud silenced the room. "I am not De Luca," Lorenzo said, his voice ringing off the walls. "And I am not an orphan. I am the man you failed to kill." He opened the box. Inside lay the yellowed, brittle deeds to the port authorities, the olive groves in Sicily, and the original Vanzetti charter. But on top of the papers lay something else, a cassette tape. "The deeds prove I own the land," Lorenzo said. "But this proves you are a rat." Chloe stepped forward. She looked at the bewildered dons surrounding the table. "My grandmother Rosa didn't just save the boy," Chloe said, her voice clear and steady. "She was the nurse for Stefano, Rossi's wife, before she died. She recorded him trading secrets to the feds in 1994 to clear the path for his takeover." Rossi's face drained of color. "She lies. She's a waitress." "Play the tape," one of the other dons commanded. Lorenzo pressed play. Rossi's voice, younger but unmistakable, filled the room, offering up names of the very men sitting at the table in exchange for immunity. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The predators turned their eyes from Lorenzo to Rossi. Rossi scrambled back, knocking over his chair. "It's a trick! It's fake!" He lunged for a gun tucked in his waistband. But he was old, and he was slow. Lorenzo didn't move. He didn't have to. The other Don's bodyguards had weapons drawn before Rossi could even disengage the safety. "Take him outside," the oldest Don said, waving a hand dismissively. "Do not ruin our dinner." As Rossi was dragged screaming out the back door, he locked eyes with Chloe. She didn't flinch. She leaned in just as she had that night at the restaurant and whispered one final thing in the old dialect, loud enough for only him to hear. "Lu lupu si mangiau, upecura." The wolf ate the sheep. Lorenzo sat down in the empty chair at the head of the table. He looked at the men around him, then up at Chloe, who stood at his right hand. He didn't dismiss her. He didn't send her to the car. "Gentlemen," Lorenzo said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. He slid one to Chloe. "Meet my consigliere." The waitress was gone. The Queen had arrived. So that is the legend of Chloe Grace and Alessio Vanzetti. To the police, it was just another gangland disappearance when Stefano Rossi vanished in 2014. But to those who know the streets of New York, it was the night the ghost of Sicily returned to claim his throne. Chloe never went back to waiting tables. Rumor has it, she still walks beside him, the only person in the world allowed to whisper in the boss's ear. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun. It's the truth spoken in the right language at the right time. What do you think? Did Chloe make the right choice, or should she have run when she had the chance? Let me know your theory in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, make sure to smash that like button. It helps us find more lost legends like this one. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Comment the word vendetta if you made it to the very end, and I'll heart your comment. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you ignore. You never know who understands your secrets.